Drain the life from your enemies with the Los Muertos Specialist Leech. What's up guys, I'm BTC. Today I want to show you this brand new amazing hero concept. In Overwatch, there aren't too many characters that would be considered villains. There are a few in Talon, but there are other groups that Blizzard just doesn't give enough attention to, and one of those groups is Los Muertos. They have such incredible potential, and yet are never used. Previously, I made a character for Los Muertos in the form of Vidal, the Corrupted Healer. I even made a fully animated comic introducing Vidal, and if you haven't seen it, there'll be a link in the description. It's pretty cool, go check it out. For all of my hero concepts, I use a theme, and for Los Muertos, that theme is lifesteal, and with a name like Leech, you can bet he definitely will live up to that. The hero creation method that I used is to create an interesting ability and build the hero around that. For Leech, that turned out to be the ability of Blood Drinker, which I'll explain a little bit later on. The goals for Leech are to create a character that offers high risk and high reward, make him specialized for dealing with high health and armor, and just for a story element, he's an assassin member of Los Muertos. The overall style of play would be similar to that of Tracer or Genji. The streets of Dorado can be a rough place. While largely untouched from the problems with Omnics, it is plagued by crime and violence. The primary cause is a group known as Los Muertos, and they are always on the lookout for new recruits. Some are swept up because they have no other options, while others seem to be born for it. There are a small number of specialized members in Los Muertos, like Vidal and Lewis, but the majority are low-level grunts used to carry out the basic operations. It's quite common for these grunts to intimidate the locals, but unfortunately for a few, they picked a bad target. One evening, 3 new members of Los Muertos believed he would be an easy target to rob. They wanted to quickly earn their way into the good graces of Malo, a particularly ruthless leader in Los Muertos, who was responsible for that section of the city. Leech had always been on the small side, and as a result spent most of his life defending himself from bigger threats. Leech needed to rely on speed and a very sharp blade. He found out rather quickly that striking the right places would have the same effect, regardless of how big his opponent was. Things didn't go quite as the grunts planned, and only one of the 3 made it back to the hideout. Mello was furious that his men had been such miserable failures, but also curious about the man that did it. For Mallow, a new strong recruit would always be worth losing a few weak ones. This man turned out to be quite adept at removing troublesome opposition. While some would comment that Leech perhaps enjoyed his role a little too much, Mallow couldn't care less as long as the job got done. Leech is a flanking character that always wants to be to the side or behind the enemies. He has strong burst damage, but very low sustained damage. For his primary attack, type is hit scan, damage is 24, it can critical, rate of fire is 1 per 0.2 seconds, spread angle is 1.2 max, fall off range is 15 to 25 meters, ammo is 8, reload time is 1.5 seconds, and there's an additional effect that sound will drop off faster than other weapons. Volume will drop to 50% at 20 meters, 25% at 25 meters, and no sound after 30 meters. If you're wondering, other characters will have their sound begin to drop around 30 meters, and then it just gets more quiet the further away you get. But with Leech, it would just stop making any noise after 30 meters. For reference, the door up to the capture point on Hanamura is only 25 meters. So in most cases, you're still going to be able to hear it, and also don't forget that when you get hit by Leech, even if you can't hear it, you're still going to get the hit marker telling you what direction it came from. His first ability is Blood Drinker, and right away I'll say that this ability would require extensive in-game testing to get the balance right, so consider the 15% as a starting point and not something that would be set in stone. The ability type is both a debuff and a self-buff, range is 35 meters, duration is until cancelled or 3 seconds after line of sight breaking, cooldown is none, effect is 15% of healing on the target goes to Leech instead. This works exactly how Zenyatta would place his Orb of Discord on an enemy. You place it there, you can move it around to any number of enemies, and it will stay there until you move it, or until you lose line of sight, or the enemy uses some sort of cleansing ability like a Wraith Form or a Zarya Bubble. While this ability is primarily a lifesteal, there is a small anti-heal component because you are taking some of the healing, you are reducing the healing from that one target. Let's take a look at some of the numbers. If Ana is trying to heal Reinhardt, it's 70 per hit, minus 15% is going to be a heal on Reinhardt of 59.5, and the remaining 10.5 will go to Leech. And if you're looking at Lucio, who heals at 16 roughly per second, minus 15% of that is going to give Reinhardt 13.6 per second, and Leech will get 2.4 per second. How this works when the target is already at full health is going to be dependent on what type of healing it is. For example, with Ana, if she tried to heal Reinhardt when he's already at full, it's just going to go right through him and it doesn't even register as a heal, in which case Leech would get nothing. But in the case of Lucio and Brig and Baptiste and several others, when they try to heal, it's going to hit everyone in an area and Leech will take his percentage even if the target is already at full. His next ability is Blood Rush. Type is self-buff, duration is 5 seconds, cooldown is 10 seconds, move speed is plus 70%, reload time gets reduced down to 0.8 seconds, which does provide a little bit of a damage boost potential if you reload during the use of this ability. This is what Leech will use to initiate and to escape, and you also need to be quite close in order to use his ultimate, so this will help with that. His next ability is Hemorrhage. Type is projectile, damage is 20 plus an additional 100 damage over time. It cannot critical. The projectile speed is 90 meters per second. Duration is 4 seconds, which means that 100 damage over time is broken up into 25 damage per second for those 4 seconds, and the cooldown is 8 seconds. This ability doesn't do a huge amount of damage, but it does force the enemy supports to constantly try to heal the targets that are being affected by the damage over time, which will synergize with Leech's Blood Drinker for those characters that are not using any kind of area effect healing. It's also quite effective against any enemies that have armor, because as of right now, armor does not reduce any damage over time effects from abilities. But even if Blizzard did change this at some point in the future, it still wouldn't affect Leech, and that's because of his passive. Leech's passive is called Piercing Strikes. Type is a buff, it's always on as a passive. The effect is that armor does not reduce damage from Leech's attacks and behaves like normal health. However, the damage can still be reduced by things that apply a resist effect like Fortify, Ironclad, and Nano Boost. Leech's ultimate and most of the damage from the Hemorrhage ability are damage over time, which means they already ignore armor, but this also means that Leech's primary attack, quick melee, and the initial damage from Hemorrhage will also ignore armor. Remember, Leech is not designed to go into the enemy backline looking for supports. He is designed to go after enemy targets that have a lot of health and a lot of armor. Leech's ultimate is called Chupacabra, and if you're unfamiliar, it's a mythical blood-drinking creature associated with vampirism, and while supposedly it's been seen in North and South America, primarily it's supposed to exist in Central America, which is where Leech and Los Muertos operate. The ultimate voice line is a little cut. The type is Melee Lunge. Damage is 120% of target's maximum HP, which is drained at 60% per second. It cannot critical. The range is 8 meters. This is how far the lunge goes. So when you activate the ability, you lunge forward 8 meters and it will apply the effect to whoever you hit. The duration of the ultimate is 2 seconds. Charge requirement is 1400, and the effect is that Leech gains temporary shields equal to the damage done up to 200 maximum. Shield decay will start 3 seconds after the drain effect finishes, and the decay rate is 10 per second. This is very clearly not a big team fight ultimate. It's meant to take out a single target very quickly and also provide Leech an extra benefit for the remainder of the fight. While the ultimate does deal a lot of damage very quickly, it's not a guaranteed elimination. Things like Wraith Form, Ice Block, and Zarya Bubble will completely remove the effect, and if the healers are very quick, they can also provide enough healing to offset the damage. This chart will give you a better idea of what that 120% damage actually looks like. Against a target with 200 health, Chupacabra will deal 240 total damage, 120 per second. And as you can see, against the characters with much higher health, it will deal a lot more damage. So while it can still be useful on targets with only 200 health, it's much more effective against the big, heavily armored targets that have a lot of health. To answer the question, what happens if the target has less than full health? It doesn't matter. The damage is not based on current health, it's based on max health, and that includes any bonus health that the character may have from abilities. This leads to some interesting interactions. For example, Lucio has 200 health. If you hit him with the ultimate, it will deal 240 damage. However, after that, Lucio can use Sound Barrier, which will boost his health by 750, easily protecting him from that damage. But in the reverse situation, if he uses Sound Barrier first, it will boost his health up to 950. If he is then hit with Chupacabra, instead of dealing 240 damage, it will now deal 120% of that 950, which is 1,140 damage. The same thing goes for Kinetic Grasp, Adaptive Shield, and Winston's Primal Rage. While they can save you if you use them after you get hit with the Chupacabra ultimate, if you use them before, all it's going to do is amplify the damage by a massive amount. You might have noticed that I tend to make most hero concepts for tanks and healers. It's not that I don't want to make any for DPS, in fact I have a whole bunch of really great ideas. It's more that people tend to like the hero concepts for tanks and healers instead, probably because there's already a ton of DPS in the game. And if you remember, I said I made this character based off of the ability of Blood Drinker. Originally, I had that on a support character that I was working on, but it just didn't really feel right on the support character. So I decided to move it over to a DPS, and that's how I got Leech. If you have any questions about Leech, feel free to leave them down below and I'll try to answer as many as I can. Also, if you want to check out more awesome hero concepts or that animated comic that I made, the playlist link for those videos will be down in the description. And also, if you're interested in finding a hero concept that might be a good counter to Leech, I would suggest checking out Mikhail.